Welcome again to the Academy on Computers. Did you know that business makes up 60% of the microcomputer market? I wonder why micros are so attractive to people in business. In this program, we're going to examine some of the reasons for and the implications of that growing business market for microcomputers. And to help us explore this whole question, as usual, we have Jim Butterfield with us. Jim, what's the attraction for business?
Well, firstly, microcomputers are very inexpensive, so they're easily accessible to small businesses who couldn't afford a big computer. Secondly, even large computers, large corporations who have big computers often find that micros are useful to offload their central computer, or for that matter, to send computing power through the organization.
All right, what is this computing power used for in business?
Well, usually there are traditional data processing roles in business. They often involve accounting, such things as accounts receivable, billing, perhaps analysis of sales results, things like that. Now, with a small computer, you can put them to much more detailed and individualized tasks, such as decision-making, evaluating employee performance, simulating future scenarios, word processing, communications between departments, project management, or information retrieval.
All right, Jim, but is there enough software being developed to satisfy all those requirements?
Both software and hardware, Jack. Some machines are being designed specifically for the needs of the business community. For example, the machine over here, which is Apple's Lisa system.
All right, what's so special about Lisa?
Well, one of the interesting things about Lisa is it has a rather advanced operating system.
So what do we mean again by an operating system, Jim?
Well, the operating system is a collection of programs that gives the computer its basic capability, including the way we communicate with it, both input and output. This machine is quite advanced, particularly because it allows you to transfer information between different programs.
And if it allows time transferred easily, that means I don't have to switch disks or key in a lot of commands?
That's right. In fact, the keyboard gets de-emphasized in favor of a new kind of device called a mouse. This allows you very often to select by noting on the screen what it is that you want to do next. And you don't need to use the keyboard as much. Let me show you this, because you see a little marker on the screen as I move the mouse around.
A little arrow here, all right?
Right, that moves around. The arrow moves around in response to the movements that I make, so that I can select the various things. Here what we have set up is something like a businessman's desk, and there are various baskets and clipboards and waste baskets and things like that arranged around it, and we can pick the job we want to do. It might be word processing, it might be graphing, it might be a spreadsheet, for example. Let's call up a spreadsheet, and we can do the job that we want. Now, it lays on top of our desk, and we can go between this job and other jobs as we go. For example, here we have a typical spreadsheet, employees, salaries, benefits, and so on. We could change it if we want to, but instead, here's what we'll do. We'll select the part of the document that relates to the totals and the budget, and we'll ask for this. Here we have some capability to roll down to the top like a scroll hanging down, and we'll say what we'll do is copy that part of the document, the part we marked, over to the clipboard. Now, there is a clipboard down near the bottom.
It's the clipboard here.
Yeah, let me uncover it. I'll cover that part of that document here and say, down here's a clipboard, and the information we marked has gone over there. Now, that means that what we can do is we can pick up, for example, a graph drawing program, and we can move the information we've extracted onto the clipboard. Now, here is a blank graph, and up here is a place where we can enter information. We'll mark where we want the information to go, and now up we go here and say, here's what we want to do. We want to paste the material from the clipboard onto this graph. Here come the numbers. You'll see them going in, and along with them, there goes the graph. We have a nice bar graph, and this is moved over from a previous document. Okay, let's change the kind of graph that we have here. We can change it from a bar graph to a line graph, or if you like, we can make a pie chart out of it. Okay, here comes the pie chart, all neatly drawn for you automatically.
The same information.
Right. Now, as with the spreadsheet, we could then take this information and we could go ahead and print it, but we can take it even a step further. We can say, that's fine, but what I'd really like to do is to take this graph and pretty it up a little bit. Let's call in the drawing package. First of all, we'll mark the graph. Select all the graph. There it is. And then we're going to go back. You see how it's turned dark to indicate it is there. And let's take this graph and copy it to the clipboard. There it goes. It has been moved. That graph now is on the clipboard. We'll take this chart. We won't tuck it away. We'll simply put it in the corner of our desk here. And there it goes. You can see our budget document is still sitting on the table behind it. And now we'll call up our graphing package. While that's coming in, I'd like to draw your attention to some of the things along the bottom. We have various things down here like a clock, a little calculator we can bring in and use, The clipboard, of course, that we've talked about, and over
You
here,
have a waste paper bucket.
that's the information we don't need anymore.
Can you get it back from the waste paper can?
If you like digging through the wastebasket,
All
you
right.
can do that and get information out if you put it in there by mistake. Now, here we have a graph system, and it's all laid out ready for us. It's really a drawing system. And what can we do on this? Well, we're going to pick up the graphs that we previously put on here. Let's unscroll our little edit commands, and we'll take the graphs that we previously put on the clipboard, and we'll paste it into our drawing chart. Here it comes. And that should come up very, very shortly. Okay, you see our graph here? We'll make this graph, the bottom part of it isn't quite visible. Once again, we'll change the size of our sheet by simply bringing it down. We'll cover up our basket and other things. And there you can see the whole graph. Now, we're ready to start drawing and doing things. For example, see this part marked the third quarter? Why don't we take it and move it out a little bit away from the other part of the graph? Okay? There it is. You see, we can explode that pie chart just about that easily because we have a drawing capability. Up here we have a nice title called Opus Project. We'll mark it and say, what kind of a type style should we put that in? Well, it's fairly small letters up there, so let's unroll our type style thing, and let's pick some pretty big letters down here. 1/3 inch modern sounds pretty good. Watch the sign that says Opus Project. See what's happened? We picked a different typeset. Let's make that a little classy. We'll put shadowing on it, and let's see what we end up with now. There's a nice shadowed title. We could pick that title up now and move it any way we want to on the graph. How does it look there, Jack?
I like it above.
You like it above? Okay, well, let's move it away from the graph, and we'll bring it over there. That's a good place for it. Okay, but the thing is that you can get to move it around any place you want to. Same story. We can pick up this thing, and we can print that thing onto paper. We can go ahead. Let's put some text on here. We'll say, okay, the reason why the third quarter is important is that's when Jack Livesley was hired. So we'll type into this document, right in this point, let's say Jack hired. And that will complete that part of the document, and now we can even put a little frame around it to show how important that was to our third quarter result. See what a pretty thing you can do with this thing with very, very easy movements of the mouse and easy entry on the keyboard.
I'll look at the fourth quarter because my fortune's
That's right. Now this is just like any other document. You can take that one and we can also tuck that away. It's still there. But you can see all of the documents are lying on our desk.
Just as they would on your ordinary desk.
Right, and we can move information back and forth between all of these documents. You've seen how we've done that.
Would this be a revolutionary step in micros, Jim?
Well, it's certainly a new direction in unifying the various things that we do on small computers.
And more expensive?
Well, the Lisa is somewhat more costly than the average microcomputer we've talked about here, perhaps 2 to 3 times the typical microcomputer that we've shown on this show.
You could use Lisa as a word processor.
Yes, you could.
But I thought there were machines called word processors for that task.
Yes, these are usually microprocessors which are designed specifically for the job of word processing. Now, on the other hand, you can get a conventional home computer and put a word processing program into it, and then you'd have something that would do word processing too.
Now, it's just a matter of software. If it's just a matter of software, why would I buy a word processor and not an ordinary computer?
Well, I think I can show you that, Jack, by going over and showing you some of these machines. Here we have the AES Alpha Plus 12 computer. Now, this is a dedicated word processor. That is, it's designed specifically for the task of doing word processing, and everything about it is there to make it easy, not for programmers, but for operators. For example, the very carefully designed keyboard, the way that the keys are laid out. For example, if we want to do something with disk, instead of having to type in the word disk, we have a little picture of a disk over here. We have a green square for go, a red square for stop. If you want to do an insertion, for example, it uses a little pick, which is the same sort of thing that you would do if you wanted to insert something and were marking it on a piece of paper. It has a French keyboard in this case. We see the special French characters, and in fact, we have a little French poem on the screen, complete with the accents that the French language needs. You notice that it's sort of unified. There's a little printer built into the top. This is for compactness to save you a little bit of desk space. But generally speaking, here we have a machine that is dedicated to the process of word processing. But then again, the distinctions aren't that clear, because if I fit into this machine some extra circuitry and a new program, this machine will then do CPM, and it becomes a conventional home computer. So the distinctions are getting rather blurred between the dedicated machine and a general purpose home computer.
All right, Jim, what capabilities would I look for in a word processor or an ordinary microcomputer with word processing software? What would I look for?
Well, there are several things that you might look for depending upon your needs. For example, you'll certainly want to be able to insert and delete words You'll probably want to be able to move paragraphs around, but there are many other things you can get on a word processor, such as the ability, say, to do form letters, the ability to do spell checking on your document, and many other features such as setting margins and adjusting paragraphs and indexing and so on. There's quite a few. I think I can show you a number of small computers fitted with word processors and show you at least a sign of some of these features. Here we have a Commodore Model 32 computer.
It's the ordinary microcomputer with word processing software.
Right, this one has the Word Pro 4 Plus software in it, and it becomes a word processor. Now, one of the styles of this word processor is that what you see on the screen as you type in doesn't look like the final piece of paper. So that what we have here is a large amount of information on the screen, because we're not trying to imitate the paper, we have room for more stuff, but at the same time, it doesn't look as neat. And if you want to see what the final document looks like, then you have to invoke a special command. In this case, we'll say, let's take the output to video, and here comes our output, all neatly formatted. That's the way to look at a piece of paper. Less stuff on the screen, but perhaps a little more readable, and you can see. What we have, by the way, is this
the word ends.
Right-hand margin is neatly lined up, just exactly the same way as the left-hand margin. That's called right justification, and again, it's another feature you might look at on micros. How does it do it? By adding extra spaces where necessary to fit this sort of thing.
It comes out just as it would on a sheet with the word endings that it would be on a printed page.
Right. Let's move on and take a look at another machine here. Here we have the Nelma Persona computer, and this one is fitted with a package called WordStar. Now, WordStar does set things out the way it would appear on the final document. In this case, we have very wide margins on our document, so it fills most of a line. But I've set the margins in a little bit. Now, that hasn't changed this document yet, but if I pick this paragraph here in the middle and say, move this into the new margins I set, you'll see it reformatted as it will appear on the final document. Let's see if we can do that with the right control key. And here is that paragraph, once again, right justified to make it look neat on the page. That's the way the final document will work. One of the interesting things about WordStar and other word processors too is the way that it tries to help you through the things that you need to do. For example, here we have information about our document, but we can also get help information on the screen at the same time. We can do that by calling in a special help screen, and it remains permanently on the screen here if I type it in correctly. And now, sitting on the top part of the screen while the text is still on the bottom is information as to how you go about doing the various functions you do. So it helps you along in what you do.
So there are some differences in each machine, and I would choose the one that would suit my style of writing and editing.
You pick the hardware and the software for what you want to do exactly the same as anything else on a personal computer.
Thanks very much, Jim. Jim and I will be back with our studio guests right after this.
Attention Academy participants. If you have started working with your hands-on manual and are having trouble understanding a particular point or carrying out a procedure, you can contact our computer specialist who's standing by on weekends to answer questions at area code 416-484-2614, Saturday or Sunday mornings from 9 a.m. to noon. That number again, area code 416-484-2614.
In our studios, we have three people well qualified to discuss computer technology in business and education. We have Don Tapscott, a writer and an integrated office systems consultant, Heather Menzies, author of Computers on the Job, and Bob McIntyre, professor of special ed. Jim, over to you with our guests.
Don, I gather you're an integrated office systems consultant. Can you tell us more about what you do?
Sure. I work for a company called Trigon Systems Group, and we consult to both the users and the suppliers of the technology. We help users plan for, design, and implement systems, and we help the manufacturers or the suppliers determine what business and user organizations need and help them market and implement these new systems.
Okay, Don, do you think that the average person needs to learn to cope with microcomputers in the office environment?
I'd say from our experience, it appears that there will be a computer or computer terminal on the desk of most people by the end of the decade, and that it will be a big challenge for most people to learn how to use this new technology.
Heather, you're an author. Can you tell us more about your work?
Yes. Well, in the last 2 or 3 years, I've been looking at the social implications of computer technology, which simply means are people going to lose their jobs? And the first study I did was called Women in the Chip, and it found that women are going to lose their jobs. And then the second book was what people can do about it, perhaps, and then looking at all phases of our economy being affected by automation, and that was called Computers on the Job.
And do you think that the average person will need to learn to cope with automation, with microprocessors in the office?
Very much so, because essentially it's a whole series of new techniques. And once you master them, then you're master of the office of the future, and you have a very important role to play in it. If you don't, you could be left on the outside.
Good. Now, Bob, you're in a rather different field. You're a professor of adult and special education. Is that right?
That's right.
Can you tell us more of what you do?
Well, sort of two hats. One hat I work with trying to improve the education for kids who are having trouble in the regular school system. With the other hat, I work with graduate students trying to get through their schooling. So I work with both extremes.
Now, as an educator, do you think that people should learn to cope with this new microprocessor technology in the office?
It's almost essential for even operating in the present day, particularly at the graduate level. The students I have who don't operate word processors are having a much harder time completing their work, their papers, and their thesis.
Okay, now what do we need to keep in mind when we implement technology in the office? What are the possible dangers? Don?
Well, I'd say there are a few. I guess one of the biggest problems is people who have an elegant solution in search of a problem rather than starting out by trying to understand what people need and what problems the technology can address. Another group of problems has to do with implementing the technology. Very often, implementers don't fully take into account that it's human beings that will be using the technology. And it's important to involve people in the process of change that's happening around them and to develop approaches to training and educating to make sure that people can have not only control over the technology that they're using, but to be more productive through that process.
Heather, do you agree?
Yes, what I'm finding, for instance, in looking around in different offices where they are bringing in the office of the future technology, word processors, etc., is that their managers tending to be taking a very short-term goal of let's increase our productivity and save on labor costs and other overhead. And so they're bringing these systems in as machines to replace people or to diminish what they're doing, instead of bringing them in as tools, allowing people the opportunity to really master them so that they can go on and do innovative new things. And this is the trick. And unfortunately, administrative support, clerical workers are in danger of losing their jobs. Up to 1 million women could be unemployed by 1990, for instance, is one of my conclusions. And then middle managers could also be out of work.
Do you feel the short-term view is indeed short-sighted?
Very, very much so. If we took a longer-term view and saw this and always implemented the technology as a tool of innovation, it would allow, for instance, managers to relieve themselves of all the mundane reporting functions, for instance, and go on and do much more innovative, truly decision-making managerial type work.
Bob, do you find about the same kind of thing in the schools? What do you have to keep in mind when implementing technology? Are there dangers?
Oh, yes. And I think part of the issues are the same that Heather has already mentioned and Don, that we can use the microcomputers to program the children to put essentially very routine kinds of drill and practice work in their hands, which automates them but doesn't enhance their learning. Or we can use the same tool with different software to give them a chance to get some power and control, mastery over an important aspect of their own environment. And I think that's the important issue on applications in schools.
Okay, we talked about the dangers. What about the good side? What are the positive things we might be able to achieve by putting computers in the workplace? Heather?
Turn to the subject of education, because you have a good illustration of it there. You could see computer-aided instruction replacing teachers, or we could see teachers really coming into their own as the tutors, as the true educators, leading out and helping children to discover in the workplace, in the office. Women who just worked typing, for instance, could go on to doing more exciting information packaging work, using graphics, etc., to put together very eye-appealing reports for the public relations department. They could go on to doing information broker work, which is essentially a research assistant function. Instead of in the old office getting stuff out of a file, now you're going out to computerized databases, doing keyword searches, bringing back very specialized information. And similarly, at the managerial level, you can use the computer as, for instance, as a tool for logical analysis, analyzing various options in personnel planning, market analysis, etc.
Don, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes. I think that traditional computer systems were used to displace costs. They were used to improve the efficient processing of structured information like accounts payable and general ledger and so on. But as the technology becomes more mature, as it becomes more powerful, and as it drops in cost, the potential exists for the first time to directly support people, all people who work in the office, in information handling, communications, decision-making activities. And I think that a simple focus on displacement of cost is really aiming at the tip of the iceberg in terms of the opportunity, if you like, from a business point of view. The really big opportunity is to use this technology to improve the thinking of people and to improve the effectiveness of organizations. Just one point on the issue of productivity. Productivity is a ratio between an output and an input. And if you want to improve productivity, you can try and reduce the input, or you can go after the output side. And that's where we're convinced the biggest opportunity lies, in using the technology not only to improve the amount of work that people can do in offices, but through saving them time to free them up to be able to do new things that they couldn't previously do before. And when you think about all the problems in society and all the things that have to be done, that's a huge opportunity.
Okay, Bob, and you must be seeing good things happening in the schools, too.
Oh, of course. And again, from the same shift, using a word processing program to teach composition focuses students on the editing, rewrite, and polishing skills rather than laboriously recopying to make sure they got the spelling mistakes corrected.
Okay, Don, I'd like to ask you, why is the microcomputer such a significant feature of the office, of the automation of the office?
Well, it's significant because the cost is low and its power is high. And because of that, these things are proliferating like rabbits throughout organizations. We recently asked, at least an associate of ours recently asked the systems manager how many micros there were in his organization. And he said, gee, I think we've got a lot, probably a dozen or 2 dozen, but let me check it out. He came back a couple of weeks later and it counted 803. To buy a micro, all you have to do is have the discretionary budget of, say, a few $1,000s, and an individual user groups, rather than waiting for 18 months for the data processing department to develop an application, are running out and buying micros.
Okay, Heather, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I hope that they proliferate like rabbits, because that will allow people to get their hands on the power of the computer. And everybody, from the office manager to the draft person to the clerical assistant, can say, once they've kind of learned and got onto the system, hey, I can use it for this. And it's the people doing the work who are going to have the capacity for using that as a tool of innovation. And if you've got the microcomputer there, then you've got the power to do the innovation.
There's really a downside to that, though, which is that these micros are double-edged swords in businesses. While they can be used effectively, they're also causing a planning nightmare. And it's a big challenge to overall information systems managers and senior managers to think about how, when we purchase micros, are we positioning ourselves to evolve towards fully integrated systems so that these micros can access databases when appropriately done, so that they can be used as terminals for electronic messaging and so on.
In terms of microcomputers, in the work environment, does the future look rosy or does it look bleak? Or does it look bleak? Don?
I'd say it's not possible to say that there are opportunities to use the technology effectively and to improve the quality of work like individuals, or the technology can be used in a negative way.
Okay. Heather?
It'll be rosy when and if people get the opportunity to become computer literate, that is, to learn how to use the technology in a general sense, and not just learn a specific application skill like just word processing or just data processing. So it's a matter of mastering the technology.
Bob?
Well, the best thing one can say is it's going to be different. The interaction of this technology is going to change not only the way we do work, but probably the work we do and the way we earn our money. There's no way to predict it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heather, Bob, and Don. And Jim and I will be back right after this message to answer some of your questions.
Next, on the final episode of Bits and Bytes, Billy and Luba will show us What's next in the world of computers? Video discs, teledocs, and a new computer language. We'll even see musical finger painting on a computer and listen to a few experts reflect on our computerized future. Join us for the conclusion of this Academy on Computers. That's Bits and Bytes, followed by the Academy with Jack Livesley.
All right, Jim, these questions from our viewers. The last program had a robot. How was that robot different from others I've seen in movies and television, such as K9 or TD?
Well, the ones that you see in television and movies are, of course, make-believe robots. In the wild, they're very smart and very powerful. They're not real robots at all. They're made by radio control, or perhaps sometimes even a little on the inside of them. It's interesting that robots have quite a literary history. In fact, the first robot from our year, which stands for Rossum's Universal Robot, which was a play written by Karel Čapek, a Czechoslovakian. So there are wonderful robots on there, but what we showed here was a real robot, the Hiron, the microprocessor with all of those capabilities built right in.
Right? Sometimes program examples show go-to as two separate words, and sometimes they show go-to as a single compound word. Is there a rule about this?
Well, BASIC usually ignores spaces, so it doesn't really matter if you have a space between the go and the to, or the go-to is a single word. But there's another consideration. Many things in BASIC are called keywords or command words, and words like print, for example, or input are considered special words, and you're supposed to write them together with any spaces in them. So as a general principle, it's probably better to write go-to as 4 letters in a row without a space between the go and the to. By the way, some programmers say that it's not a good idea to use the command go-to in your program too much, because that makes your program hop around rather more than it should. It's better to concentrate on an even flow of your material and keep your use of go-to down to a minimum.
All right, Jim, here's one about terminology. Is a microcomputer the same as a personal computer, or do the terms mean different things?
Well, I suppose they're similar in their nature and their meaning for them, but a microcomputer is, technically speaking, a computer which is made using a microprocessor. That is, a processor on a single chip. Now, a microcomputer usually comes, when we see it, with a keyboard and with a screen, and therefore we often use it as a personal computer. At the same time, a personal computer is any computer which is at your personal disposal. I suppose if you were rich, you could buy yourself $1 million computer, and that would be your personal computer once you've built an extension in your home and things like that. But generally speaking, they're often used to mean about the same thing.
Thank you, Jim. That's all the time we have now. On our final program, we'll be looking at the future of computers. This is Jack Livesley for Jim Butterfield saying join us then on the Academy.
This program is making